I titled Suffering, Finding the Meaning. What I want to do, of course, first is to discuss the relationship of Tisha B'Av and suffering, and then take a look at some of our sources to attempt to give some perspective on what suffering can mean. And if we develop meaning, we will hurt less. So the first things first, where does it come from? What is this day of suffering? So we know that the generation of the spies were sent to the land of Israel to scout it out, to see how good it was. They came back and they gave what we call dibat haaretz. They spoke badly, lashon hara, about the land of Israel. That was bad. But what happened after that was worse. And that is that the Jewish people listened to the words, this dibat haaretz, and what did they do? They listened and they believed. And then what did they do after they believed? They went to their houses and they cried. They cried that night. This was a huge philosophic mistake by the Jewish people, to believe a lie and then to act on that lie as if it was true. God said through Moshe Rabbeinu, we have this in the Medrash, that just as you cried this night for no good reason, okay, in vain, so too will this be a night of crying in vain. And we have to see what that in vain means, because we're going to have problems with that, because in fact we don't say that this eternal day of crying is in vain. We say that there's something for it. You cannot cry for nothing. Any person who cries for something. Something of something truthful, something of something false. We have to know what we're crying for. But that day, Tisha B'Av, became a day through all history for crying for the Jewish people. And we have indeed cried infinite numbers of tears throughout our history. The loss of the temples and the destruction of the temples and the destruction of the Jewish people and the destruction of the Kohanim. In history, 1492, the expulsion of the Jews. Spain, Portugal. We know the pogroms in England and in Germany along the Rhineland. So many, many absolutely horrific moments. This is our history. So how do we deal with that? Can we come to terms with the suffering? Do we understand it? So what I wanted to do was be able to go through and give some reasons for suffering, and then hopefully by giving you some reasons, if one should have personal natures of suffering, we might be able to come to terms with this as well. That's really what I want to be able to do. We have lots of questions, and we should know that suffering is really one of the biggest, the most powerful theological Jewish questions that exists. Okay? So my job is to highlight some of these issues. I'm certain, create a few questions. I may not give you all answers, but there are answers. The question is whether there'll be answers for you. I don't know. We'll find that out together. Okay? So let's start. Let's look at bad things happening to good people. And it is difficult to discuss, as I've mentioned. The first example we should discuss is the example of the Rav Elisha ben Abulia. He was a sage. His other name, when he became a renegade, was Achar, as they called him. Who was this brilliant Talmudic sage? And what happened? It's one of the few examples in the Gemara that we actually have of a loss of faith of a great man, a great learned person. Because usually we say if a person's really learned, they're knowledgeable, so they're not going to fall down. He fell down. Okay, what happened? How did he become a non-believer? There were two issues that occurred in his life that created this, as we understand it. Number one was that he was watching a person's son climb up, presumably on a ladder, to perform the Torah mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan, of sending the mother bird away when he takes the eggs. Okay? And we struggle with this understanding of this mitzvah. Nonetheless, this is a Torah mitzvah. And the person who does this will merit eternal life, long life. What happened to this boy? Unfortunately, Lo Aleinu, he fell off the ladder and he died. It was a tremendous blow to the understanding of Reb Elisha ben Abulia. The second one, the second traumatic moment that occurred in the rabbi's life, was that his teacher, Reb Chutzpis, who was one of the greatest of the Talmudic teachers, whose teachings were so charif, so powerful that when he would speak, a bird that would be flying overhead would be singed and burnt from the power of his Torah speech. That's how we understand how great a teacher he was. He was tortured by the Romans. His tongue was cut off. When Elisha ben Abulia saw that, he could not countenance it. He couldn't cope with it. It was too much for him. How could God allow this or these two episodes to occur? And from this he had a tremendous loss of faith. And ultimately his loss of faith led him down a road. And the road he went down was the road of ultimately, in the end, becoming a renegade. And I'll speak about that just for a brief moment in a moment. But let's just focus, please, on three aspects of this. Okay? Number one, it is the only area of faith loss in the Talmud that's listed. But it's listed as the point of number two. Okay? Okay? And what's the point? That we're not afraid of mincing words. The Talmud is not afraid to talk about things that are painful. The Talmud doesn't walk away from things that hurt and say, let's not talk about that. That wasn't good. No, we talk about it. It's there. And the sages had the courage not to whitewash this. Third thing is, did Elisha ben Abulia not have the intellectual ability to know the truth? This is the question for all of us when we know the truth. Could he not have come to the right answer to why bad things happen to good people? Okay? So one of the answers is, and there are many, but one of the answers is that yes, he did. He did know how to answer it. But when we are up against terrible, hurtful pain, and in our own lives in particular perhaps, we may have the intellectual answers, but we don't have the emotional strength to come face to face with the suffering. We can lose it, in other words. Make no bones about it. It's an emotional response that can push us off. If we take the time to think things through as we could, we would come to perhaps different answers. And in fact, I just want to point out something about this gentleman, Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia, who became Acher. His name changed, became another. And this one became a friend of Roman government, became an anti-Jew. And yet, despite this, his prized student, Rabbi Meir, would chase after him over and over again to allow him the possibility of doing tshuva and repenting. Beautiful message occurred through the Medrash I'd like to share. The Medrash says, why is it that he would not give in and repent? Why not? Because he heard a bus call. He heard a voice emanating from heaven saying, Acher, you may not repent. You're not welcome in Olam HaEmes, in the world of truth. You're not welcome. You can't fix yourself. So which he turned to Rabbi Meir and said, why are you bothering me? My life in this world and the next world is over. Just leave me alone. Let me be what I am. So who was right here? Why was Rabbi Meir going after him to try and make him change? And Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia says, I can't change, and I won't. Listen to what it's the answers, and we'll go on. It's fascinating. It's powerful. It's meaningful. The bus called. This voice said, Acher, you're not welcome. But Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia misunderstood it. Because Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia was always welcome back. It was Acher. It was that image of a human being, that despicable image of that Jew who went off and ratted on the Jews to the Romans and did many terrible things. That person couldn't come back. But if you want to change and become a different person, you are welcome. This is a very powerful lesson for us for all time. It's not relevant to why I'm talking today about suffering. It's absolutely relevant to understand that a Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia could have returned, but he wasn't thinking. He was feeling. Excuse me. And if he was thinking, then he would have realized he could have done wholesale tshuva. He could have become a different person, and most certainly he could have come back. Okay. So let's go on. Next idea I just want to share, and that is that we should always be aware when we're talking about issues of suffering, that there are really, you can only come to a class like this for one of two reasons. Either you want knowledge, you want information, you want the intellectual understandings of what it can be, the reasons for suffering, or you want pain relief, because it hurts, and you're in pain and you want relief from your pain. So I'd just like to say, I'm going to give some answers. It may or may not be with pain relief. That we'll have to see. The second point is that when you go to a shiva or you go to a place to be with other Jewish people who are suffering, remember, it's not your job to be the ambassador of truth. It's not your job to figure out if people want intellectual understandings. Make sure, number one, that you give them pain relief, that you give them support and caring and love and warmth, number one. Okay, because that is number one. I just want to remind you, we're not meant to bash people over the head with truth when they're hurting. But for ourselves, we're meant to understand. That's the difference. Okay, so for somebody else, you know what? Support them and be good to them. Let them come to their truth. For you, everyone in this room, and all Jews who are in the process of learning and growth, I have to know for myself. For me, I have to know the truth of what life is. That's why I'm telling you those truths. Okay, let's go on. So, questions. There are questions when we have suffering. Number one question. Is there a God or not? That's one question that people who suffer come to. I'm not going to discuss that at length today, the proofs of God or not. There are many methods of coming to that answer, and it is absolutely critical for every single Jew to come to that answer as to whether there's a God or not. And then question number two, which we will talk about, is God good? That's second question. Is God good? So is there a God? Can you ascribe suffering and hurt to a being that runs the universe? And number two, is this goodness? Okay? And this is a harder one, but we're going to go through right now and see if we can answer some of this. Okay? So let's go forward. Okay? Now, it's very important to use a general approach for suffering and not pretend from a distance to answer an individual's personal suffering. Rabbi David Gottlieb of Or Sameach many years ago commented on this point. He said that even a very good physicist, even an excellent physicist who understands all the mechanics of drag and friction and wind can struggle to describe prospectively a leaf falling to the ground, whether it's going to go like this and over there and all the way down. Following a leaf down to the ground, right, looks simple, but it is impossible almost to describe in advance exactly how that leaf's going to fall. But anyone can take a camera, right, and take a picture or take a little movie camera of watching that leaf fall to the ground, and then in retrospect be able to go back and be able to say, of course we knew how that leaf was going to go to the ground. We often, in retrospect, may be able to pick up hints, clues, or understandings of why people have to go through the pain they have to go through. But prospectively, it can be very difficult to be sure up front as to what reason or reasons the Almighty are giving. So I'll come back to that issue because it's important. Okay. So let's talk about a few ground rules. Okay. These are really from Torah's time, from really instructions for living. A ground rule means that if we can understand how Hashem runs this world, and there are certain understandable rules, then we can generate from there the ability to understand more deeply what His providence is in this world. Okay, so let's go through that, okay? The first one, number one, mankind, person-kind, okay? You want to be gender conscious, is gifted. Gifted with what we call choice. We're not programmed. We may have predispositions, but we have the ability to choose the most fundamental choices of life for us. This is a critical understanding for starters. We are not programmed. It's my nature that I can decide yes, no, or maybe to so many things in life. Okay, that's very, very important. But what comes with this? What comes with being a co-partner in creation? That God, so to speak, throws me the keys to the car, and I grab them, and now I have the ability to make changes that will change this world or change even higher level worlds in this world. Well, one thing is for sure, that if I am given choices and they're available to me, then there must be consequences to choices. Can it make sense, I would ask anyone here, that the Almighty in His wisdom would give us all these choices, but they're all meaningless choices? Then what are they? If there are choices without ramification, then what's the value of a choice? So in fact, we say that we have choices and they matter. Okay. And a corollary of this, okay, and now I'm going to introduce a new idea rather than choices, is the idea of good and evil. That if our choices are to have value, then there have to be better and worse choices. Therefore, the Almighty creates evil in this world. evil has to exist in order for us to be able to make moral choices. I have to be able to choose away from things that are not good, whatever those definitions are. I'll leave them for today, good and evil. I'm going to leave the definitions, but I want to tell you that I'm going to be able to choose away from things that are not good and choose away for things in the direction of things that are good for me. Without this, we have nothing. Okay? So not everything is the same thing as, like, you go to buy yogurt and you got vanilla yogurt for 120 calories for whatever grams, and here you have strawberry, okay, it's 120 as well. In those type of morally neutral choices where there's no difference except for the taste, it seems the same. Ask a person who has a life-threatening anaphylactic shock to strawberry, and he'll tell you that those choices are totally different. One is alive and enjoyable, and the other one will put me into hospital. There is no choice for me, but there is a choice. If the choices are not meaningful, if there's no good and evil, if there isn't a direction that one should go to in the ideal, or a direction that one should go into, then there's going to be no way for you to properly choose them. So a gun to the head to do X, Y, or Z cannot be a choice. I just want to make that point for people. It can't be a choice. Okay? Therefore, you have to be able to choose good and evil, and therefore, you're going to have to want, to some degree, to choose evil. Therefore, it has to be that things that are wrong have to be tasty. Okay? That's the whole question philosophically as to why God does not make, and it's a big question I have on him, he doesn't make broccoli taste like ice cream. Okay? For me, it would make all the sense in the world that everything should be like that. So that I should only want to choose broccoli. It's nutritious, it's healthy, it has everything in it, it's all good, and it's so delicious. I wouldn't eat, it's like ice cream. No siree. No siree. There is a certain moral value of choosing broccoli over ice cream, especially if you're a diabetic. There is. Okay? Okay, so therefore, if we're a co-partner in creation, we have to be able to make choices. There has to be evil. There has to be good. If it's all good, then there's no choice. The second point is that righteousness, doing the right thing, according to these guidelines, cannot automatically lead to a wonderful result. Because then, like young kids, so then we're only going to do good because we know we're getting rewarded for it, we're going to win. So therefore, our motivations are not going to be necessarily pure. So remember, if I know 100% in this world I'm going to have a great life by choosing 100%, then what is my choice? What is my reason for choosing it? Am I choosing it because God gave me a commandment? Am I choosing it for a relationship with the Almighty? I can get closer to Him. Or am I choosing it because it's expedient? I'll get something in my pocket for it. So therefore we have to know that righteousness cannot come with an automatic full benefits. Okay? We'll not be able to choose it appropriately if that's the case. Okay? And third, and this is very important again, I just want to stress it, that ultimate justice is not to be found in our immediate existence in this world. Ultimate justice is going to be found in the ultimate place. And the ultimate place isn't here. Okay? We are a two-world people, unlike our Muslim brethren who are a one-world people that would give up this life for something. We say we're going to live. We're going to live in this world. But to think this is our only world or the major world, that all the goodness has to occur here? No. We say classically that there is no reward for the mitzvahs in this world that are done in this world. Only the wherewithal to be able to do more mitzvahs. So we don't get our reward, so to speak, whatsoever here. And we don't get our justice in this existence. We get some justice, but it's limited. Okay? And it's not full. And we're not happy about that. Nonetheless, that is the nature of a spiritual rule. So if one comes into the world saying, I'm going to be observant. I'm going to do God's mitzvahs. I'm going to be rewarded. And suddenly you find, hey, that didn't happen. The tax man still gave me a big bill. I can't pay it. Or this happened, or that happened, or that happened. No, that's not a proof of anything. Justice is not to be found in this world. Challenges are to be found in this world. Opportunities are to be found in this world, as I'll discuss later. Okay, number two. That's really one big number one. Okay, talking about choice and the fact that there has to be good and evil, and that we cannot automatically get our full rewards here. Number two, issue of eternity. Okay, let's be clear. Now that we're talking about this world, what is this world for? If we don't know what this world is for, then we're going to be embittered by the challenges of this world. That's for sure true. So one thing I tell patients, whether they're Jew or Gentile alike, I tell them that it is part of the human condition to have challenges, troubles, problems, struggles, as I said, frustrations, suffering. That's part of the human condition. That is so part of everyone's life that it's so clear that this is what human beings have to go through when they live down here on earth. And that supersedes all history. So why is it that in our generation we want to pretend and act as if there's no suffering? May you have an easy life, right? That, you know what that is? That's a Chinese curse. Okay, may you, actually it goes like this. May you live in interesting times. That's the curse, okay? May you have an easy life is the North American curse. That may you not have challenges. We're all having challenges. What's real? Is it that we're having too many challenges? Or is that our capability of dealing with challenge has been muted and sort of pushed away? That's the question to raise. So I want to tell you that this world is Olam Ha'asya. This is the world of actions. This is the world of doing. This is the world of things happening to us that we might or might not be happy about. It's a world of accomplishment. Okay? It's not the world of enjoyment and reward. It's not yet that world. So we live very powerfully in two worlds. This world is the world of accomplishing all kinds of things, whether it's being with family or friends and community and working, prayer, relationship with God, giving people money who need it, charity, whatever it is, whatever makes a human being a full human being. That's what this world is. And we want every moment of it. We want to live as long as we can in this world. That's not a contradiction. But to think that this is what the world really is, or this is the whole story, this is really just the antechamber. This is just the small little vestibule of a huge mansion that we're going to. This is not the final story for us. This is just one piece of a whole story. Okay, that's why we eat an egg when we have what's called the Suda Hamafseket, right? When we have the final mini meal with bread, ashes, and an egg just before the fast starts. Why the egg? The egg is a circle. Life is a circle. This is all part of the life cycle of a yid, of a human being. And this is only one piece of it all. Don't get excited about this world. This is not where the action really will be. Our tremendous joy and reward is coming later. But it doesn't mean you can't enjoy yourself now. You can. You should. It just means that you don't lose perspective on your challenges. Okay. So therefore, eternity is coming, but it's not for us now. Okay? And this, by the way, creates tremendous tension for us, because we are really a two-world people. And it's very tense. The idea that down the road we'll be rewarded for all our good. And yet, I'm supposed to live fully here, with my feet on the ground, wide awake, alert, trying to make the best life I can as a human being down here on earth. Okay, and that is really the tension of what a Jew goes through. And they both matter. You know, in Mishnah, when you're fasting. In Pirkei Avos, one moment of mitzvahs in this world is worth all of the world to come. And then the next line, but one moment of pleasure in the world to come is worth all the mitzvahs of this world. How can we say this? How can the Tana teach us this idea that they both seem to be contradictory? Because we live in both worlds intensely, that's why. And we don't give up one world for the other readily. We want the best of this world in every regard that we can have, right? We have the levels of pleasure, Rav Noach has spoken about. We have the world to come and all the inherent goodness there by following the Almighty's wishes. We have both. Okay. Number 3. I'm going to give a total of 8 principles here. So that's 3. Number 3 we're coming to now. So we talked about first thing the issue of free choice and what a human being has. We talked about the issue that we're a two-world people and that there's Olam Haba to come, there's a world to come, and all the benefits. Number 3, we don't always get the whole picture. Okay? You take a look at Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our forefather. He went through a horrific life. Right? So many struggles and so many problems, and the loss of his son Yosef, and the mourning, and all the negative things. And in the end, the story comes together. And what do we understand when we're reading the Chumash? Here we are 3,300 years later, we're reading the Chumash together. Yeah, it all makes sense to me. I get it. Poor Yaakov, but it had to be this way. How else was the Jewish people going to be taken care of in Mitzrayim, in Egypt? How else were the Egyptians to be saved, for that society to be saved, for the Jewish people to have a posterity? How else could they emerge a nation? So you see, when you read it with the eye of hindsight, it makes sense. I'm sorry, Jacob, you had to suffer, but your suffering had a reason. And ultimately it was for the good of everybody. And Jacob in the end could realize that because his last years of his life were really good years for him. Okay, in fact, there is a quote from the Gemara that says everything goes according to the end. That you can have a life of difficulty and misery and struggle, but if your life ends up on the right path, you'll feel that your life is good. I've heard that from dying patients many times, and I've seen it. And we have that from the Gemara as telling us this. So therefore, we know that suffering can have reason, but we don't see the picture, and we don't like it. And when we don't like it, we want to push it away. So we just have to remember ourselves that we don't always get the big picture. Because why? This is important. Because God is infinite, all-knowing. He created time. He created mass. He created all the things that we see. And we are finite. We are just 80 years old, 100 years old. That's it, maximum. Our understandings are limited and feeble. We don't get to the bottom of anything. That's true in science, which is my area. It's true in so many areas that we're like little children. We don't know. So just admit it. We don't know. So we're unhappy when we see things that aren't good. But to think that we have all the answers, that's a mistaken thought, okay? And what I want to just remind you about is in old stories, you get those rug hooking things or the macrame things, you know. It's beyond my ability to understand how it works. But you do it, you make a beautiful picture. But if you turn that around to the other side and take a look at the back of a macrame, it looks like garbage. It looks like nothing. It doesn't look like anything. This is the analogy for us in our lives. We look around and we see devastation, and we see people that don't like us, and we see a world that's gone crazy. And in our own lives, we see people suffering, and we see hurt, and all those things that make us feel uncomfortable. We just don't get the picture, okay? Because God didn't turn us around and let us see it yet, okay? We have to know this. We have to know that we don't have a clear vision of what the enormity of life really is. When you know that and you can be humble about it, that helps you to understand when you don't understand suffering. Okay, let's go on. Okay, another, number 4. What looks like punishment is really, or may really be, an opportunity for growth. Okay? Now remember, this is true for any athlete, right? You want to run a marathon, right? So you punish yourself. You're suffering. You're running 6 miles, and then a week, 2 weeks later, it's 8 miles, and then 4 weeks later, it's you're running 10 miles a day, right? Suffering. It's horrible. You can imagine if a Martian is watching this scene, right? They're seeing this guy run out of his house, and he runs, and he runs, and he runs, and he runs. The Martian's wondering, where's he running to? What's the problem here? It looks like a problem. In fact, you know, to other people watching, it looks like a problem. The guy's a fanatic. You know, he just runs forever. And then the person's running, and his knees hurt, and the ankles hurt, and the heels hurt, and you're getting shin splints. And what's it for? But when you're in that marathon and you're running, and you've done it, you've created an opportunity for such joy and pleasure. And when thousands of people are yelling at you, saying, go, 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 you know, that's a feeling that a human being gets not very often. That's so powerful. It makes it beautiful. So we know that we can suffer and have difficulties so that something beautiful can come out. So you can become a marathon runner. Or that you can go to school for many years and become a professional, if that's your thing. In the end say, that was so hard. All those years, all those nights, all those weekends, all the work we did, all those tests, all those... And in the end, you have something to hold in your hand that's valuable. So therefore, punishment from the Almighty is an opportunity for growth for us. If we would see it this way. The Kedah Yitzchak, right? Avram holds up his hand, the knife. He's going to go ahead and shecht, to slaughter Isaac, right? He's about to do it. And the angel says, no, stop. Don't do that. Hold yourself back. The Abraham that's in heaven, the ideal one, and the Abraham on earth, the real one, are the same. They're both congruent. You have achieved. So actualization of potential for a person can only occur through difficulties and suffering. That's difficult. To be the best adult possible, it means that you're going to have to go through losses. To be a comforter of someone who's lost a parent, I'm sorry to say, most likely you have had to have lost a parent. You want to really help someone who's gone through cancer. Maybe you had cancer. You're the best helper for that person. When we experience the experiences that move us and shake us and push us, and it hurts, we grow. And when we grow, we become that person out there in community who can help another person who needs that help. That's the nature of what God sends to us. He sends us hurtful things, but we end up becoming great people because of it, and we end up being able to share those things that we have with others. Okay, that's the idea. So therefore, what looks like punishment, really, it's growth opportunity. We give back. The Almighty gives us a slap in the face. It doesn't feel good. But you know what? A year later, we understand what it's for, and now we can support somebody else who needs the help. Number 5, every Jew, every single Jew is put here on earth for a specific and unique reason. My reasons are not your reasons, and vice versa. So I have to spend a life finding my reasons for being here. What am I meant to accomplish? What is my yud? What is my special mission that's unique for me that I have to do? You don't have to be me, and you don't have to be like me. And I cannot be you, nor can I be like you. But we can all learn from one another, and we can all be ourselves to the best that we're meant to be. Okay, so what is that? So we should know that when we take a look at our suffering and our difficulties, they may be the reason for us, that we need them, okay, to bring something into the world that's special. The example that was given to me is Rav Hillel. So what do you see? Hillel, the great, great sage, came from a very exceedingly poor family. He was so poor that he couldn't afford admission into the Beis Medrash. Okay, he couldn't afford to go in. He couldn't pay the fee. But he wanted to learn so much that he went on the roof. And he stayed on the roof listening with his ear to whatever that roof would be in the middle of a snowstorm. And they found him huddled there under inches of snow, freezing. He became the great Hillel from the poor family to forever teach us that wealth is not a deterrent for learning Torah. We needed him. We needed that example for us to know that you can learn under privation if you need to do that. We hope that no one ever will have to, but if you did, you could, because Hillel did. Okay, and Hillel was a normal person who became a great person, just like all of us are normal people who in our moments, our special moments, can become great people. Okay, that's the point. So we have to find our reasons and have to know that we have an individual suffering for ourselves that may have a very good reason for it. Number 6, we live in a complex world. So you see, we have a problem. All of us do, I believe. I certainly do. I want to explain everything. I want my finite, puny mind to be able to comprehend every aspect of what goes on around me so I can get it. We all want to get it, and when we don't get it, we're not happy, and we usually blame, say, God, why'd you do that? It was wrong. You know why it was wrong? Because I know what the right answer is, and it wasn't like what I thought. Okay? What's the point? It's a complex world, and God deals both with the individual and also deals both at the same time with the nation. Okay? And therefore, a person's reward can't be compromised by the need of a greater group of a nation. You could be a person caught in the wrong community at the wrong time, and maybe you personally have the righteousness not to deserve the negativity that will ensue, but you're with those people, and you cannot stop it from occurring. It can happen. It can happen that your greatness can be stopped. Okay? In Nazi Germany, the Germans, Yimach Shemam, took the greatest of Jewish minds, right, and put them through torture and terrible things. What happened? These people, some of them never turned out to be the geniuses that they should have been, or the professors that they should have been. Some did. I'm going to quote from one in a few minutes. But many did not. What's the point of what I want to say is that our circumstances may be defined by factors that are bigger than us because of the need for a nation, because of the need for a country. And sadly, we just happen to be where we are at that moment. It's difficult to understand that, but it's a complex world. Okay? Finally, this is a difficult one regarding God's hidden face and decrees. Why is it that we have to suffer? Sometimes God tells the nations, please oppress the Jews. Do we understand that? None of us in this room will want to ever understand this. And on Tish B'Av, when we're talking about the terrible things that occurred to us, what do we know? We know that Titus, the great warrior, murderer, general, had a voice come into his room for 17 years in his palace saying, please go destroy Jerusalem. Where'd the voice come from? Psychosis? That's not what we say. The Almighty, God said, you go ahead and destroy the temple. I'm sorry, but its people don't deserve it. Now, Titus could have had two choices. He could have just said, sorry guys, look, just get out of my way right now. I got to destroy the temple. That's my job. God told me to do it, I'm going to do it, and it's going to be done. And that's it. Move out of the way so no one gets hurt. He could have chosen that. Titus, however, hated the Jews, so he killed so many people. He caused such mass murder that the bloods were flowing, that they used Jewish blood for fertilizer to the Gentiles in Israel for years after this. What do we learn from this? It was his choice to further destroy the Jewish people more than that was necessary. He was cruel. And from a point of view, the Almighty will avenge the blood for anyone who has murdered Al Kiddush Hashem through the sanctifying God's name. If someone comes to kill me because I'm a Jew and for that reason alone, the Almighty will deal with it. But it doesn't mean he'll deal with it at that moment. Because that person, the people that were killed, God didn't intervene. Why didn't he stop it? He could have. There are reasons why. And God hides his face sometimes, even when people do things that are way beyond what they should be doing. But nonetheless, we see sometimes that God will not intervene, even though we would logically say, please intervene. And then it's for us to work out why it is that he didn't intervene when he could have. That's a question for us. Okay? The last idea here that we'll give on these is that if we want to understand something about God, we have to understand that God is infinite. Okay? He has no needs, no pleasure, and no pleasure to punish us. So it's not for any kind of human motivation that I want to put on the Almighty. None of them are relevant. God has no desire to do to us. Okay? The chastisement is only for our benefit. Okay? And every single relationship that you can think of has in it, excuse me, reward and punishment. What's the alternative to those? The alternative is indifference. God is never indifferent to us. God cares for us, and that means like a parent that's really watching their children with an eagle eye, right? They will correct us when we need correction. They will love us when we need love. And they will not turn away from us and just pretend they don't know us at any time. Okay, so let's go forward right now, because I want to discuss one more set of ideas about justification of God's actions, and then I'm going to give some homework, okay, because I won't give a class and talk about why God might inflict things on us and not tell us how to view it. I'm going to give that as the last 15 minutes of our discussion, which is the most important part. But first, I want to share with you again the words of Rabbi Gottlieb, who divides up suffering into two categories. So this is a different schema than I just gave you, but I want to try and give you some more schemas to understand. So God is infinite. He's perfect. We don't get him. We don't understand. It's too complicated. The world's complex, but there has to be rewards and punishments. So let's put this in simpler language. Here we go. There is either past justification for us to have suffering because we somehow, in some way, shape, or form, as human beings, we deserve the suffering. Okay? It's important at least to acknowledge the possibility. So, for example, a person could undergo suffering for things that are unknown, either to people outside of that individual, even the individual themselves. Okay? I did something very bad. I can't believe it. I forgot what I did. Ask that to any husband who doesn't bring the flowers for an anniversary or something. I forgot. How did I forget? It doesn't matter. You're guilty. Okay, so what's the point? The point is that we make mistakes. We either know the mistakes, we don't know the mistakes, but we make them. The Almighty says, I'm sorry, I can't let it go by. There's going to have to be a payback. There's going to be a consequence. There's going to be a correction. I'm going to give you the ability to know that you have to fix something. Responsibilities, which we failed, where this time we do know. We missed the mark, okay? Yes, it happens. So there is a consequence. Now, if you read books like Tomer Devorah, the more complicated, beautiful books on Jewish ethics, so God tries so hard to hold off on giving us punishment. He really does. He holds back, and he holds back, and he holds back. He's waiting for us to fix ourselves. We'll see evidence of this. If you read in Tanakh, you see that God didn't wipe out everyone all the time, every minute. He wanted the Jews to get better, to fix it. We just kept going, making the same mistakes, until finally we got hit. But the point is, it's for us when we make mistakes. Another idea is that we will be punished and have suffering when we are on a higher level of existence. So it's a sad but true comment. The better the human being you get, the more God expects from you. Scary. You almost want to be Canadian and mediocre for this one, right? Don't let me get too good. Don't want to be too good because This is the nature of growth. As I become a more holy individual, whatever that might mean, and I won't define those terms, but when I become that person more and more, the Almighty expects more from me. God doesn't expect less, He expects more. The more you are willing to follow His rules and will, the more He expects from you. So therefore, it's possible for a person on high level to endure a suffering, punishment, problem, more than someone who's on a lower level. Because why? Because that person's ready for that and needs to have it and will only further grow from that, okay? So we have to understand that there are higher standards of suffering and higher standards of judgment that the Almighty will mete out on different people if they need them. Here's another one. This one is, I think everyone will relate to. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi says that everything is in the hands of heaven except for, so fear of heaven, right? But Yerushalmi adds something that's not in the Bavli, and small colds. What's the idea here? The idea here is that you want to blame God Almighty for your heart attack because you drank like a fish and you smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. Don't blame God for everything. You have to take some personal responsibility in your life because the Almighty allows some amount of a derech hateva to exist, a way of the world to exist. That means that if you really are not behaving responsibly, then the world, the things that happen in the world will happen to you no less than anybody else. So therefore, you can't say, God will protect me, God will preserve the simple. That's only true in certain cases. There are other cases that you will get sick. If you let yourself get run down, you stay up late at night and you get up early in the morning and you drink too much coffee and you work too hard and you don't rest, what do you think is going to happen at the end? You're either going to get a migraine or you're going to get sick for a couple of days. You're going to blame God for this? God says, no. You didn't follow the rules of health that I gave you. What do you want from me? So therefore, those little colds, so to speak, are not in the hands of God. Doesn't mean that He can't modify them for anyone that He feels the need to. It means He set up certain rules for human beings to live by that we can't violate them and think nothing will happen. Finally, deserving the suffering. Sometimes a person can come back in a different life. We do believe and do have an understanding for reincarnation, that the soul did not finish its task on earth in one life and has to come back to finish it. And sometimes that soul may be riddled with issues and troubles in order to fix up a problem that in a previous life the person did not have a chance to fix for whatever reason. Now, I'm not saying to you, and that's the first half of past justification, that we deserve to have suffering. I'm not saying here that any individual can easily figure this out. I want to be careful. I'm only telling you that there are answers. And the biggest problem we have is we start reading into ourselves the answers for ourselves that we think are applicable, and we could be running a major risk. Okay? And therefore, just remember, if I tell you that there's answers, it doesn't mean that you're going to get all the answers to who you are in 1 minute or less. That is a mistaken thought. But that there are answers. Future justification. Ready? That a person has to suffer not for what they did, and not as a fixing, but rather to create a future good. Or if you like, to create a future better. Okay? This is difficult. Okay? So we know, for example, that we have to have a free will. We know that the world has to work in a certain way. Okay? Free world means that God's justice is going to be hidden. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to benefit. We're not going to be able to grow properly. So free will means that if A tries to kill B, the Almighty may very well have to allow it to occur. Why? Because if it were not occurred, the people who were involved in this moment, from then on in, would have no ability to make any moves in their life. They would be frozen. They'd be afraid. If we saw God intervening with us directly every single minute, for every single problem, we would be frozen. We wouldn't want to move at all. I wouldn't want to move a muscle. I'm afraid maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I'm going to get zapped for it right away. God gives a free will and time for us to do whatever we need to do. Okay? So if we say that there's no such thing as undeserved pain, that we have a problem. Okay? That would mean that our free will would diminish. So we don't say that. God allows things to occur in order for us to have the sense of freedom. Why would a person get hurt for something in the future? Maybe they're righteous. And maybe the pain or suffering that you have to endure will clarify for you what your role is vis-a-vis God. Clarifies your motivations. Clarifies why I do what I do. So if I say I'm a Torah Jew and I'm doing it for mitzvahs, I want to do it. Very nice. And then I trip and fall and break my foot. And now I start swearing and yelling, I'm giving up on this Jewish stuff. I don't want it. a suffering may come to make a person clarify, am I real with what I say I am? Am I real with God? I want to keep mitzvahs. I said it. I do it. Is it real? You'll only know it's real when God sends you a challenge, and then you respond in a way that's meaningful to that challenge. So sometimes the Almighty will send us things to clarify for us who we're meant to be. Okay? Clarifying the motivation of the righteous. So people who are very righteous sometimes suffer even more. So there's no guarantee if you're righteous you'll suffer less than other people. There's the fact that you might suffer even more. Okay? We say that the suffering of the righteous actually acts as an expiation of the guilt of the generation. We have to be careful. This thing sounds almost Christian, but that's because the Christians borrowed it from us. Okay? Okay? Righteous people don't die for our sins. Okay? But when a righteous person leaves this world after suffering, the Almighty accords the generation positivity for that person. And in fact, when that person goes upstairs, they become a Meli Tziyashar. They become a very good person on our behalf to help the people down here manage their lives. Suffering may raise up the future good, okay, so that we can make positive changes. So not just does it clarify who I am, but it may actually make me grow. We see this, people who go through terrible times often come out with greater spiritual understandings. So a person who struggles, in the end, can become farther ahead than most people who don't have to struggle. Classic example for me that comes to my mind are my drug addicts, patients that I look after who have addictions. They are often much more spiritual and much more sensitive than many of the people I look after in my life in my regular medical office. Why? Because they had to go through so much to get out of it. They had to think their way through their life and figure out what's important for them. So that's why there are programs like AA and NA programs that have not a Christian bent, but a spiritual bent. That there has to be a creator that pulled me out of this mess, because otherwise I would have stayed there. So therefore we know that struggles can make us more spiritual. They can make us grow. Okay? They develop dormant abilities. So if I go through a very bad moment and I'm required to change, I will develop something in myself that I didn't have before. And as I alluded to earlier, that will make you special to be able to help other people who need that special bit. Okay? And the last idea here that I want to share, which is very difficult, is that it may prevent suffering in Olam HaEmes, in Olam Haba, the world to come. No one wants to suffer here for anything. We've had enough challenges, thank you very much. But if you could know with certainty that you're a soul that's infinite, and if you could know for certainty that you're going to a better place where you'll be rewarded, and you want as little of the bad side and as much as the good there, then you'll be happy to take your knocks here rather than there. So there is such an idea that when a person goes through excessive suffering here, that is going to be a tikkun, a correction for what will happen when they come to the world to come. Very difficult concepts, but we do have them. Let me now talk about dealing with suffering. As I said, I promised you I would get some ideas. I have about 15 minutes left, and I want to actually go through how to deal with suffering. So this is the part that, if I could do any good for you, this would be the part to listen to, I think. Okay? So first thing, how do we deal with suffering? Okay, we've had lots of it. We have on national levels. That's what we're talking about, the loss of the temple. I said yesterday in a brief devar on the Kina that we don't even know who we are. We have a loss of sense of self. Who am I? Jews are amazing people. We are so amazing in this world, and I don't say it arrogantly, not like, head up, nose up in the air. We are amazing where we've come from, what we believe in, what we do, and we don't even know it, and we don't even recognize it, because if we did, we'd be happier people. Okay? But how do we deal? So I'm going to give you 3 or 4 different philosophic approaches. And you can imagine one of them is the approach that I like, and you can imagine the other approach is the approach that I don't like. You can figure out which is which. Ready? Here we go. First thing, a person who's secular, who doesn't have a sense of a creator, who doesn't have a sense of reason for why they suffer. So they have no rhyme, no reason. Life is random. In general terms, that means life is essentially bad with some good thrown in. Okay? I'm not saying everyone thinks this way who's secular, but I'm saying many do. They view challenges as bad. Okay? Nothing to learn from them. So what's the response of a person like this? If a person says that challenges are bad and we don't want them, I want to escape from them. Okay? I want to go on holiday. Okay? I want to go to movies. I want to go to the arts. I'm not saying that it's all wrong to do any of these things. People do them for relaxation and to feel better. But a person can make a life out of chasing after the arts and culture to get away from themselves. Okay? Escape.
That's
Substances for sure. Drugs for sure. Yep. Yep. And commonly in our society, because those are like the negatives, money, power. Okay? People run after money because money will protect me. Because with money, after all, you can get the best doctors, right? Money, you can get the best home. So we often run away. Those people that don't have a sense of godliness in their life or a sense of reason will run to things to support and protect them, is what I want to teach. Okay? That's a response, protection from pain. Okay? A deistic view. Okay? So what's deism? God exists, but he's impotent to stop suffering. Many years ago in my Jewish youth, so to speak, I read the book of Harold Kushner, right, who was a conservative rabbi. Okay? So his view was, God's all-powerful, but not really all-powerful. He couldn't stop sickness in my son. My son died young of cancer. That is proof to me that God is impotent to deal with things. Now, I have to tell you that I will have to take exception to his view and not agree with him, okay, strongly. Okay, but I'm not knocking him as a person. He lost a son, and it hurt him and forever hurt him, and he never recovered from that, I don't think, in this regard. So for him, God was brought down a notch. God cannot protect us, okay? So he created the universe, but he can't stop suffering. Okay, that's deistic. I'll give you another secular humanist approach, okay? And this is Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote a beautiful book. Again, it was not about God, but it was about the beauty of humanity. I'm going to read a page or two, if I may. First thing, Holocaust, there's a connection for the day. And I want to talk to you about his views on how he deals with suffering. Because he did suffer. He was in the Holocaust. He was a Viennese psychiatrist. He was an academic of the highest order before the Germans took him. And then he stuck with his people in the midst of the Holocaust, terrible things occurring. So I want to at least give you, if I may, an idea here from this. Okay? As we said before, any attempt to restore a man's inner strength in the camp had first to succeed in showing him some future goal. Nietzsche's words, he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. That's from Nietzsche, the philosopher. I don't happen to like Nietzsche. Okay, could be the guiding motto for all psychotherapeutic and psychohygienic efforts regarding prisoners. Whenever there was an opportunity for it, one had to give them a why, an aim for their lives in order to strengthen them to bear the terrible how of their existence. Woe to him who saw no more sense in his life, no aim, no purpose, and therefore no point in carrying on. He was soon lost. The typical reply with which such a man rejected all encouraging arguments was, I have nothing to expect from life anymore. What sort of answer can one give to that? What was really needed, and this is the page I want to just share, and then we'll stop in this part, and I'll give you some Jewish observant ideas. What was really needed was a fundamental change in our attitude towards life. We had to learn ourselves, and furthermore, we had to teach the despairing person that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life, and instead to think of ourselves as those who are being questioned by life, daily and hourly. Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and in right conduct. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. I can go on. He writes so beautifully, and he talks about the destiny to suffer and accepting suffering as a task we have to do, and that no one can relieve an individual of his own personal suffering. His unique opportunity lies in the way in which he bears his burden. And I put in brackets in this book, opportunity. Now, if I would have taken out the word life and put in the word God, it would sound as an observant philosophical idea. Okay? He does not talk about God here. So that's why I said he's really in the secular camp. But he recognized that there can be some higher guiding power. He recognizes that we have to find meaning and look for meaning. And more important than anything, we have to respond to the moment, respond to the pain, respond to the suffering. We have to do something in response. Now we can talk about a Jewish position, okay? So in the Jewish position, okay, and this I hope will give you some ideas about what maybe we can do in terms of suffering for ourselves. We have to view God as existent. He's here, he's everywhere, all-powerful, all-knowing, and caring. If we would think this way and put that deep into our mind, we know that any type of suffering we have has caring within it. That's what we know, okay? So there's a reason for suffering. There's a rationale. And then what? There is a response. Okay? So we are being bidden to respond to hurt in our life. And acceptance of the ultimate good. Okay? Acceptance. We can pray for things to be different than they are. We can take and make changes in our life as best we can to make things better for ourselves, and we should. And then we have to accept what we can't change. This is a Jewish position. But let me go through and talk about this a little bit more for a couple of minutes, and I'll be mindful of time. At 2 o'clock we'll finish. A spiritually sensitive person. Whatever that means, I'm not going to define spiritual at this moment, although I will say that the words sensitive and focused have to come into that definition. A spiritually sensitive person views the greatest source of happiness as... What is the greatest source of happiness? The gift of life. That the Almighty gave me a life. That's my greatest happiness. Listen what comes out from this, and it's not easy. If people want to fight with this, we can talk after. But we don't view life as being above or below par depending on what's going on in my life. That's often something, like if I have a bad day, and I share that with my partner, and it's, oh man, it was terrible. But that's not a Jewish response. That's just a sort of a mindless response. Life is not above or below par depending on the experiences. Rather, life is really what? Life is the place of opportunity for growth. That's what it is. And we can exalt life with all the good things that happen to us, and we can exalt life even in the negative, even when they're not so good. Life is the place of growth. Life is not a fun, gotta be fun all the time thing. Life is the place where things happen to us that we can grow from. Okay? We see, as an example, in the court of Pharaoh, we see reactions to 3 of the court members that were asked to help Pharaoh decide what to do with the Jews. Jethro, he ran away. Job, was silent. He said nothing. In Bilam curses and tells them what to do. Okay? And we see that their fates are very different. Okay? What happens to Eob? Eob suffers and suffers and suffers. What happens to Bilam? Bilam dies a rapid, quick death with a sword at the neck. So our sages ask the honest question. It's a difficult question, but so which is better? Isn't it better to die quickly, right away? Quick, over? Suffering? Who wants to suffer? Suffering, isn't that worse? It's only worse if one misunderstands what it's about. Okay? If you think that life is not worth it, then suffering is bad. But if you think that life is intrinsically valuable, then suffering means that you can live longer. That's good. Okay? Life has infinite value. We teach the world this concept. The medical world is fast forgetting this concept, certainly where we live. Okay? So when your grandparent goes to emergency and they're sick, the first thing the doctor will say is, do you want her to die? They may not say it in those terms. They may couch it up with nicer language than I just said, but that's what we're going to say. DNR, no resus, life is over. And you know that 2 days later she's telling you jokes in her room, right? So you say, no, treat her. Do your thing. You're a doctor. You're not 007. You don't have a license to kill. Treat this person. Help them. Okay? I'm letting you know we live in such a world where this issue comes up. But we have to know for ourselves that what we're saying is suffering has a value, that I want to be around. And I may not feel so good, but that is meaningful. Okay, so that's one point. Okay? Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz points this out, that he says that we might have intuited a quick death was better, but we see here that protracted suffering still has meaning, and it's still valuable. Okay, so what's the approach? Let me give you one negative Jewish approach and one positive approach, okay? And we'll tie it up, the story today. Okay, negative approach. Yaakov Avinu, is brought down by his family to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. And there he meets Pharaoh. He meets the Pharaoh of Egypt. The Pharaoh looks at him and says, how old are you? And Yaakov Avinu answers, I am 130 years, but my days have been few and bitter. That's a paraphrase. So the Almighty takes off a year of life, of his potential life, how much he could live, based on every word he said. But our sages have a little bit of a problem with this particular medrash, and that is that we see that he actually got more life taken off. In fact, how much more life did he get taken off? He got taken off the number of words that Pharaoh asked him. Not just what he said and he responded, my days have been few and bitter. But Pharaoh looks at him and says, oh man, you are old, man. What was he referring to? So according to this understanding from the Medrash, he wasn't referring to the fact that Yaakov was one of the first human beings to become old, which is true. That's what our Medrash teaches. No, it's his attitude. He acted old. He acted beaten. When we act beaten, we look old. When we look old and beaten, it looks like we don't want to be here anymore. Like, why don't you just beam me up, Scotty? Get me out of here now. I don't want to be here anymore. Should we look this way? He was punished for looking this way because a person took the blessing of life, right, and made it small. Okay. Positive idea. Okay? In Derech Hashem, in one of the books by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, okay, so what does he say? He says, what's our ultimate good? Okay? Ultimate good is the pleasure that we're going to get. What is that pleasure? So human beings were created for pleasure. That's a concept that's been taught by many great rabbis. What's the ultimate of this pleasure? It's in the world to come. That's where it is. So we have a paradox, right? We have suffering in this world, right? And yet, that suffering in this world creates goodness for me that I'm going to have a benefit for in the world to come. That's a paradox. I hurt now, and I'm really good later. I hurt now, I hurt even more now, I'm even better later. In other words, the relationship between suffering and ultimate good is paradoxical. God will send you more suffering in order to give you more good, and that's a paradox. Okay? So what do we say here? So we understand that suffering and struggles and challenges, right, what are they? They're opportunities to build pleasure energy in the world to come, so to speak. If I call it pleasure energy. All those things that life sends you, the Almighty sends you, right, make you hurt. But it's going to be good later when you respond to them in the appropriate way in this world. So he goes even further, okay? So he says two things that we have to know, okay? And that is that really suffering and challenges are the only pathway to happiness in this world. That's very heavy. It's the only pathway to happiness, okay? Now that's really, really hard to understand, but that's what we say. Everything else is escapism. So if you say, I don't want the suffering, I don't like this challenge, I'm not happy with it, I want to do away with it, you're running away from what you're given as your method of creating a beautiful world to come. This is really the key of understanding suffering. That is a two-world phenomena, and everything that you suffer now, that is to say that you suffer appropriately in a good way, will be your energy for the world to come. Okay? Therefore, what comes out from this, and we'll come to finish, is that we say here that we're not here on this planet for the prima facie reason of being happy. Happy is not an end in itself. Being happy is a means to the end of having a good life here, but it's not the end in itself. We may have many moments that are difficult, but in the very end of our life, we will have all this goodness accruing. Okay? Now, Rabbi Luzzatto makes one final point, and I'll stop. Not only does he say that every moment of challenge and difficulty, okay, is going to be goodness for the world to come, but differently, he says that the next world is nothing more than the composite of all the challenges of this world. It's nothing more. It's not just I do good deeds, and I have troubles, and I have difficulties and pains, and I surmount them, and I fix it, and that's going to get me all these, so to speak, spiritual bonus points in the world to come. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto points out, he says, no, your olam ha'emes, your world to come, is really nothing more than the composite of all these things. That's what it is. So every time you get a challenge and a problem and a struggle and it hurts you, you now know, based on our little brief talk, that there's a reason for it. It may not be so easy to figure out the exact reason for it, but ultimately it's my best good for this world to come. That's what I like to tell people, and I thank you for your patience for listening to me.